Karen has texted in to say kids who've been taken to the riot by family members should be flagged up to social services. Andrew says, hello, Paul. I don't think the hooligans throwing bricks and attacking mosques know the difference between far right, far left or anything else. They just enjoy an excuse to break things. It's just that they are easy targets for the divisive elements at the top of far right politics who need foot soldiers to stir it up. We need leaders who can bring us together as a country rather than divide and conquer us. Thank you, Andrew. A couple of texts here, though, on the flip side. Michael says, morning, if we march, we are far right. If we complain, we are far right. This country is changing. And an anonymous text here from someone saying, of course they care about Britain. That is why there is riots. There is riots across the country. Long may it last. We have had enough. OK, let's bring in Professor Roger Griffin now, who's been waiting patiently. Thanks so much, Professor Griffin, for hanging on for me as we as this conversation expands. You're an expert in extremism and terrorism at Oxford Brookes University. When you look at these riots, are they typical of the far-right tactics? And do you think that this is an attempt to try and stir up something deeper in Britain?
Well, I'm afraid, being an academic, I'm going to give you a complicated answer. I mean, one thing I'd like people to do is think of this as a riot and look at the way it relates to riots for various causes in the modern age. You can think of a number of causes which have exploded into violence. In France, you've got a number from farmers to people wearing yellow jackets to the riots of Algerians stuck in the outskirts of Paris in 2005. And there are race riots have besmirched the history of Germany since the unification in Eastern Germany, etc., etc. Now, there is a sort of common pattern in these riots, which is, and it picks up on some of the points that were made with your earlier speaker, and which you've had in some of your texts. I would say, in the modern age, there are various groups of people in society who do not they do not recognize society as theirs, that they have various grievances. There are various people who feel that they have no place in society, or that they're being trampled down by society or exploited, or the country isn't theirs, etc. Now, that leads to a simmering sense of anger, resentment, and hatred. Then you have ideologues, either at the level of political parties or at the level of traditional politics, either far left or far right, who give concepts and ideas and an interpretation, a story, a narrative to this resentment. And that's where you get scapegoating. And you can see this writ large in the rise of the Third Reich, but also in communist riots or in the French Revolution or whatever. I mean, the people who overthrew the Bastille hadn't all read great French philosophers, but the ideas of the philosophers gave a shape to their grievances, and they saw a target in the aristocracy and the Bastille. And that's where you got this incredible violence directed against symbols of society. So what's going on at the moment is that Tommy Robinson and the ideologues of what used to be called the EDL. He also tried to set up a British equivalent of Pegida, which is an anti-Islamic movement. These are actual ideologues who think and read and have concepts, are mobilizing and channeling the sense of frustration and anger that is taking the form of, if you like, racism. If you look at, for example, the history of the National Front in the 60s and 70s, when it was being driven by mass migration as it was perceived, then if you look at the link between Enoch Powell's speech and the ideas of neo-Nazis, and then the actual violence in Notting Hill or whatever, there's this complicated relationship between people who are essentially nihilists, full of anger, who are in it for the violence and destruction as an expression of their frustrations, but they're being ideologized by people in the top who know exactly what they're doing, who see the violence as serving their agenda. And so, in a way, we need to operate against the hysterical remarks of emerging from the far right of the Conservative Party and the Reform Party, some of which is really outrageously feeding, a bit like Trumpism, the resentments. Make sure that any organisation which is not committed to the values of democracy is actually outlawed, like some elements in society. And there has to be a work on the social problems and the deep social and political issues at the bottom, which are feeding this detachment from Britain and hatred of what it's become, which gets channeled into a night of rioting. Does that sort of make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really interesting. Thank you, Professor Griffin. And also, before I let you go, I'm interested in the fact that over a number of years, far-right extremism has become a growing issue in Britain, other countries around the world as well. And I spent some time on the terrorist wing of a couple of prisons in Britain about 3 years ago. It was fascinating. But the one thing I learned from doing that is that Islamist terrorism, while still a threat to Britain, has sort of leveled out or even dropped back a little bit. And now one of the fastest growing threats to Britain is far-right terrorism. I think it makes up about a third of the terrorists in UK jails. So this has been a growing problem for the state for some time, hasn't it?
Well, actually, I would say that is a misperception. After 9/11 and the attack in London, there was a massive over-preoccupation with Islam as the source of violence against society during the noughties and through into the 2010s globally. And actually, if you look at it soberly from the point of view of right-wing studies and research, they never went away. And what happened was that things like Prevent were the subtext of Prevent was really an over-preoccupation with Islamism, and the eye was taken off the permanent threat posed by ultranationalism, racial hatred, and various forms of conspiracy theory, which explode into events like the attack of Tarrant in New Zealand. What's important to note is that we're not dealing with old-style National Socialism. Modern ideological fascists have their own new ideology, if you like, based on fears of the Great Replacement and the idea that the West is being Islamized and that we are somehow, there's a white genocide going on, etc. And these ideas trickle through and license extreme violence. But I don't think we're witnessing a resurgence of the right or fascism or whatever. I just think that the socio-political situation has changed, especially in the light of increased migration throughout Europe, which has provided the triggers to this sort of violence.
Okay. Professor Griffin, thank you very much for your time this morning. Really, really interesting to get your expertise. He is an expert in extremism and terrorism at Oxford Brookes University. What did you make of what you've heard this morning? 0345 6060 973. Let's speak to Richard, who's in Paddington. Morning, Richard.
Good afternoon. No, morning, sorry, yeah. No, what we have here is a lot of middle-aged, bald violent men who've got nothing better to do. They're too old for the football terraces, and a lot of that has been knocked on the head due to legislation and lifetime bans and such. And you have this minority who by their violence have a very loud voice. We had a policeman told me not to go to the West End this Wednesday because there was riots. Tommy Robinson and his crew was down there. What's that got to do with a horrible event in Southport? And what's this horrible event got to do with mosques? It's just an excuse. You've got these little boutique right-wing parties going on. Lawrence Fox is one of the worst. He had a demonstration, which I saw on YouTube, and he was talking about, I want my country back. Is it his country or is it our country? And you've got these individuals now who believe that this is their country and it's going the wrong way. And that something has to be done something has to be done struck down by law. These people have to be stopped by law because they are the ignorant. They are the very, very lowest IQs, who get their selective information through the social media and then go and react to it. They're great when there's hundreds of them, but on their own in a court, they're not so great.